Okay, and we're live. Well, welcome everybody. We have a fantastic guest today, Jerry Marzinsky. I just want to take a quick second to thank all of the Spellbreakers podcast fans. It was my birthday yesterday, and so I really appreciate you guys' support, and it's thanks to you guys we're able to have guests like today's guest, Jerry Marzinsky, on. If you want to support us, thespellbreakerspodcast.com or buymeacoffee.com/thespellbreakerspodcast. Today we have a very welcomed guest that I've been very excited to speak to for some time. Even though I'm on holidays here, getting over sickness and traveling, I wouldn't miss this one for the world because we have the legendary Jerry Marzinsky, a man who needs no introduction, but we shall give him one anyways. Out of respect, Jerry Marzinsky, BA/M education, is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 40 years of experience working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. I believe that's an understatement. Jerry is a commercial pilot, certified scuba instructor, and long-distance motorcyclist. Very cool, fellow motorcyclist. He has held the positions of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and assistant scout master. Thank you for your service. He was awarded the State of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award and the Pima College Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He is the co-author of an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, and is currently hosting private practice in Arizona. His website, jerrymarzinsky.com. Jerry, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me here. If it wasn't for guys like you, this information would never get out. I guarantee you the psychiatric mafia doesn't want you to hear what I have to say.
That's for sure. Yeah, I've talked to a few psychiatrists about some of your theses and premises, and I would say that's an understatement as well. They don't seem to very much enjoy what you're saying. But I was just curious on that point. Do you have other psychiatrists that either quietly or not so quietly are starting to come around to some of your conclusions, or?
I know 3 of them.
Okay.
One works in, well, I think 2 work in Romania and 1 works in France.
Okay.
And a couple of psychologists have contacted me. Also, the evidence is right there in front of their eyes if they'll look.
Mm-hmm.
I started studying the voices, maybe 35 years ago, and they're not what psychiatry says they are.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I noticed they ran patterns. They spoke in complete sentences. They spoke with complete thoughts, but these were all nasty, evil thoughts. I mean, nothing was good about them. They were consistently negative. They were anti-religious. Now, the psychiatric mafia insists that these things are hallucinations. They haven't done a single study on the voices. I mean, who's going to study a hallucination? Except they don't fit the pattern of a hallucination. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral. They're all over the place. The voices run consistent, persistent patterns. And you can see those. Anybody who works with schizophrenics, anybody who has a schizophrenic family member can see these patterns themselves. And if they're running patterns, they're not hallucinations. And 2 of the most prevalent they're negative. It's one of the first things I noticed when I was working at this huge state hospital I started working at. There were 10,000 patients there when I got there. Mm-hmm. The place was the size of a small city. The voices, first of all, they don't teach you anything about the voices in psychology or psychiatry because they don't know anything about them. They haven't studied them. Haven't spent any time studying them or looking at them. The psychiatric mafia had just go, hey, we're the head of mental health. We hereby uh, pronounce that the voices are hallucinations because we said so. That's a bunch of bull. You know, if they run patterns, they can't be hallucinations. And two of the most prevalent patterns are negativity. They're consistently negative. They don't hardly say anything positive, and if they do, it's only to get the person and gig them, to get them to believe what they're saying. They're consistent liars. They're persistent liars. They lie about everything. You can't believe anything they say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I first got onto the front lines, because of the little we were taught about the voices, they said, oh, well, they're hallucinations. So I just assumed they were like uh, word salad, that they were all over the place, that they made no sense. They were just babble. That's far from the truth. They speak in complete sentences with complete ideas, and those ideas are very negative and dangerous. They're constantly attacking the person who is hosting them, and they're attacking anybody who tries to help them. They're consistently anti-religious. One of the first things I saw at the state hospital is one of the patients told me that when they repeated the 23rd Psalm, their voices reacted like worms thrown onto a hot frying pan. Now, what kind of hallucination would care about the 23rd Psalm? Why would a hallucination just be negative? What holds it on a negative pattern? These things are consistently negative. Why isn't it all over the place like real hallucinations? Why aren't they sometimes negative? Why aren't they sometimes positive? Why aren't they sometimes negative? Why aren't they all over the place like real hallucinations? No, they're consistently negative.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I've listened to quite a few of your talks, and I'd be curious in your own mind, how did it evolve for you, right? So I know first you went through the training, you started working with patients. At which point did you have kind of an inkling that, hey, maybe the model that we've been told isn't exactly the full picture?
Well, that was only after I got onto the front lines, past all the educational BS and the brainwashing that they put us through as far as what psychology is and what the mind is and what counseling should be. It was only, I mean, you look at how they hold people out from studying mental illness. In my entire 45 years on the front lines, working virtually every kind of psychiatric institution in the United States and spending the last 10 years of my formal employment working psychiatric crisis in big hospitals across Tucson, I have never, ever seen a researcher on the front lines, ever. And I've worked in a lot of institutions for many, many years. I've never seen a researcher on the front lines. They will not allow them on. You try to get a permission to do research in a psych hospital. Oh no, it's too dangerous. We can't risk you being hurt. Same thing with the prisons. When we had a visitor at the prison, they were, especially a legislature, they were surrounded by Department of Corrections staff, so they couldn't talk to the inmates. They couldn't talk to the staff.
Mm.
They wouldn't let them communicate with the people in there. Now, everything looked fine, both in the state hospital. You look at the grounds, they were beautiful, manicured. The outside of the buildings looked fine. But you get inside and it was a hell. Some of those buildings were just absolute psychiatric hell.
Yeah.
And they would just drug these people senseless just to keep them under control. Same thing with the prison. You walk into the prison, you won't see a cigarette butt anywhere. If one of the inmates throws a cigarette butt on the ground, all hell breaks loose. It's not permitted. You do not trash it. It looks pristine from the outside to fool the public, but on the inside, it's a can of worms. Same way with the psychiatric institutions. So they will not allow researchers into these institutions to take a look at what's really going on. All the research comes from the drug company controlled educational institutions. And believe me, they are controlled by the drug companies. They're controlled by big pharma. Virtually nothing gets published unless big pharma gives it the okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
Nothing gets funded unless big pharma funds it. If an institution starts putting out too much stuff that goes against what they want out there, they'll cut off their funding.
Yep.
So the United States medical system was taken over in like 1910 by Rockefeller and the Carnegie Foundation. They bought off Congress to write a law that no graduate school could graduate doctors unless they came from a university that taught pharmacology or pharmacological medicine. All right. So right away they cut off all other forms of medicine. You know,
Yeah, just on that.
naturopathy.
Yeah, just on that point for the audience, and Jerry, I'm sure you can expand on that. My understanding is that prior to Rockefeller University, that America was naturopathic, decentralized, with far better health outcomes. It was largely doctors. Yes, they had fields of study, but it was largely private practice, and they had taken they had educational backgrounds in various fields of study and medicine, and then the Rockefellers, who were previously the oil barons of the world, then realized, well, they could turn a barrel of oil into millions of dollars in pharmaceuticals, because pharmaceuticals
Right.
are derived from oil. And so they basically, through lobbying the government, basically outlawed, I think within 8 or 10 years, all naturopathic, and made allopathy the only form of medicine. And basically anybody practicing naturopathy was almost a criminal or something like that. Is that correct,
Right.
Jerry? And anything you want to
Yeah,
add
that's
to that?
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. They put out something called the Flexner Report. They bought off Congress to pass laws that they had to go through this pharmacological medical education. Nobody could graduate medical doctors if they didn't come out of one of these institutions. So at that point, they knocked off naturopathy. They knocked off Tesla's violet ray. They knocked off acupuncture, any other kind of form of treatment.
Yep.
They killed. You know, and they made a fortune doing it.
In
So
terms of
right,
the history of schizophrenia, what what can you tell us? Because it's my understanding is that it's increasing quite a lot today. Would you say that schizophrenia? Do you know much about the history? Say going back pre
I
Rockefeller
do,
University, or
and yes, and it's all in my book here, the whole history of psychiatry and mental health treatment. The whole thing is in here.
right? Yeah, guys, make sure to
It's
pick that up.
an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, and the kind of stuff they were doing was totally ridiculous. I mean, there was um, they had something that would they spin these people around until they threw up. Um, they would had these contraptions where they were basically what they were trying to do was control these people,
Yeah.
because before they came out with the uh, phenothiazines, which were
Yeah.
discovered by accident in a German dye lab.
Right.
I mean, so here's pharmacology going, big pharma saying, well, we have to charge a horrendous amount of money for our drugs because of all the research we put behind them. The antipsychotic drugs were discovered by accident
Yeah.
in a dye lab in Germany. They were um, what do you call it? Extracted by the French, and they were tested in the United States. So before these phenothiazines came out, the only way to deal with these psychiatric patients was to stuff them into a straitjacket.
Right.
Now that required a battle. You know, people were getting hurt, patients were getting hurt, attendants were getting hurt, trying to stuff these wild people into a straitjacket. So they tried to test these drugs in Europe, and at that time they were Freudians, so they didn't want anything to do with this stuff. So they came over to the U.S. and tested it in one of the psych hospitals here, and they found they could dumb up the entire population of that hospital and make them docile, and they're walking around like zombies, and that was great. That was a wonderful uh, thing for them. But before that, they would stuff them into baths with hot and cold water, and, baths with ice cubes in them. They would give the woman douches with all kinds of crap and these needles that they would stick in there.
Oh my God.
They would put them in coffin-like structures. They would hang them from the walls so they couldn't sit down. They would inject uh, malaria into these people.
Oh my
They
God.
would induce seizures. These seizures, when they were seizing up, after you seize up, you don't feel like causing any trouble. They
Yep.
would they would give them emetics, things to make them throw up. And after you throw up, you don't feel like causing any trouble. So this is the kind of treatment. And then they moved up to electroconvulsive therapy, where they would actually electrocute the brain, and they would have to strap these people down and inject them with these big horse needles of muscle relaxer, just to keep them from breaking their bones when they administered the electric shock. So they were doing that at Central State while I was there. They were doing 3,000 of those a year,
Wow.
and each one of them destroyed brain cells,
Hmm.
just like the medicines they're using today. They make you think that these phenothiazines they're using today for schizophrenia are safe. They're not. They found that with extended use, they actually shrunk the brain. They rotted out the peripheral nervous system. And when they found that out, that these researchers that were doing autopsies on these long-term psychiatric patients, they published this. I don't know how they got it out past the universities, but they did. And when it came out, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma freaked. They went, well, it's not our drugs, it's the schizophrenia doing that. You know, they they blame it on the schizophrenia. So what the researchers did, they went back and they gave these drugs, these antipsychotic drugs, to mice and rats and monkeys, and found that their brains shrunk also. So not only are they not curing anything with these drugs, they're actually killing the person's brain.
Hmm.
And they went nuts when that was published. And it's not known. These are some of the most dangerous drugs used in medicine today.
Yeah,
The
they.
side the side effects are absolutely horrendous.
I know several people on them, and yeah, their whole lives are ruined. Mind you, I think you've said this in your book as well. A lot of the schizophrenics, though, say the voices in the head are worse than the side effects, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. Um, they would admit that, but here's just some of the side effects
yeah.
of. And now these are antidepressant drugs. These are the most commonly used drugs in Canada and the U.S. right now. Nausea, weight gain, trouble sleeping, dry mouth, blurred vision, dizziness, anxiety, headaches, diarrhea or constipation, sexual problems, fatigue, tremors, increased swelling, lower alcohol tolerance, bleeding, lower sodium levels, vomiting, restlessness, muscle cramps, and seizures. Okay. And now anti-anxiety drugs, which are commonly used too: nausea, diarrhea, constipation, loss of appetite, blurry vision, dizziness, drowsiness or fatigue, dry mouth, agitatedness, restlessness, headaches, sexual dysfunction, sleep problems, increased blood pressure, stomach aches, increased sweating, lightheadedness, and tremors. And the side effects of antipsychotic drugs are many of these and worse. Okay. Now there's a new system that has come out that will treat, I mean, not only treat, but cure a lot of these common depressions and anxiety problems. It's called the MACE energy method. It came out just, maybe a decade ago or so, and it works like magic. I mean,
Yeah, I did Mace. Yeah,
oh,
I
did you?
yeah, I heard you talking about it, and I reached out
You
to
found a
a man
practitioner?
named Eric, and
Oh, good.
yeah, he had amazing things to say about you. But yeah, it's very interesting, Mace.
Tell
Yeah,
tell tell the tell your audience your experience with that.
yeah. So for Mace, I actually want to get Eric as a sponsor or Mace as a sponsor here because I've uh, I've done it and it really helped me. But yeah, so the thing about Mace is you actually don't need to tell somebody else your actual problems. It's
Which
all
is
about,
amazing.
yeah, like it's all about actually tapping into,
And
let's, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
energy.
Yeah,
It's all about energy. Because thought is energy, memory is energy, feelings are energy, memory is energy. And you can't touch those things with these toxic medications that psychiatry is giving people. You can drug the brain,
yeah,
but you don't get rid of the problems. You don't get rid of the psychological problems. You just turn the guy into a zombie. Go ahead
yeah,
and
yeah,
finish up.
exactly. Yeah, basically, it's very unique experience all around, but essentially, they just go through mental exercises, if you will, to really connect to sources of pain or undiagnosed traumas that you have that are personal to you and get you to like process them one by one in a very unique procedure. And yeah, by the end, I felt like I had lost a bunch of weight off my shoulders. And it was very interesting. Actually, doing it for my fiance. It's funny, their parents thought I was a huge jerk for getting their daughter therapy for her main kid. But whatever.
And wait
Uh,
till she comes back and tells them.
yeah. But yeah, I would recommend people check it out. Yeah, actually, I might get Eric, the practitioner, as a sponsor. Actually, he's a really great guy. But yeah, I actually want to do a full episode just on Mace as well. So yeah, and thank you for introducing that. I know you are a practitioner as well. So guys, if yeah,
Yes.
Jerry Marzinsky, you can reach out to him as well on his website. Um, but yeah, so there's so much of what you say is so fascinating. The question is where to start. But what I'd like to know is just kind of put us in the place of younger Jerry Marzinsky, right? Where you're in these institutions, you're starting to wake up to the fact that, hey, a lot of what they're telling us here is not the case. And then you're starting to actually do a very novel thing, which is, hey, let's actually ask the voices who they are, what they are, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, put us there. What was that experience like? And how did it kind of evolve for you? Like, was it just, let's try this because nothing was working? And yeah, walk us through that, Jerry.
Well, kind of where it started was I remember in undergraduate school in a abnormal psychology course. Now I never trusted authority ever.
Yeah.
I was raised that way.
Yeah.
It was just in my blood. I didn't trust authority. So I went into psychology. What I hated about psychology was that except for experimental psychology, you could not test out anything that they were saying.
Right.
You had to just take it as at face value. These scores of courses, all this information that they were making you memorize and spit back to them.
Yeah.
You you had to trust them, and that was the truth that they were telling you. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And you could not get access as an undergraduate to any psychiatric institution. Even as a graduate, in graduate school, I could get into a prison with the professor's help, but they would not let you into a psychiatric institution. They would not allow you to investigate. They want to keep it secluded. It's like a secretive society run by the psychiatrists. Researchers are not permitted. Okay? So I came in from the inside, which is
Right.
really the only way you could get in there.
Yeah.
So I had to jump through all those friggin' hoops to get in there. You know, undergraduate school, graduate school, PhD. You had just to get in the door.
Yeah.
And then they figure if they let you in there, okay, you're brainwashed enough to believe all the crap that they taught you.
Yeah, if you made it this
You know,
far, you're probably
you
towed the
made it
line.
that far, you're brainwashed. I mean, you're gonna run the program. You're gonna behave like they want you to. But in undergraduate, I remember they the professor gave us a paper to read, and basically what it said was that if two psychotics met each other and they both thought they were, Trudeau, one of them would have to give way. One of them would have to change and say, well, okay, you be Trudeau, I'll be George Washington or something like that. I read that and I go, even as an undergraduate, at 19, 20 years old, I'm like kind of going, well, why would that have to be? I mean, why would one crazy guy have to change because another crazy guy had the same identification? That,
Right.
that doesn't make sense. But there was no way to check it out. So fast forward probably another maybe 10 years. I was on the second floor of a big psychiatric institution. I was making my rounds, and I saw this guy. I was starting to notice that um, the voices that these people were hearing weren't, uh, verbal cabbage. I mean, they weren't just, you know, nonsense. What it sounded like was listening to somebody on one side of a telephone conversation. They were carrying on coherent conversations with somebody I couldn't see. Now, I could hear their side of the conversation. I could hear the arguments. I
Yep.
could hear the voices getting loud. I could hear them getting upset. But it was very difficult to try to get close enough because when you got close, they'd shut up. Okay? So I was on the second floor of the Whittle building at that time, a psychiatric hospital, one of the psychiatric units I was assigned to. And I saw a new guy on the floor, and it was my job to kind of keep an eye on everybody in that institution. Anybody was going, we were like spies for psychiatry. If anybody was losing it, we would have to snitch them off to psychiatry, and psychiatry would drug them. And that's all we knew back then. That's what we were taught. That was the only remedy. That was the only treatment for psychosis, was to have the psychiatrist drug people. You don't, and you could see that regular counseling didn't work with these people. I mean, you could talk yourself till you were blue in the face. It didn't have any effect on them. It was like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle. Talking to them didn't phase them. There was no logic. Whatever was driving them just blew past any kind of talk therapy like it was hot air. Nothing. You know. So the only thing that we had that worked were the phenothiazine, these heavy-duty major tranquilizers.
Hmm.
So I was making my rounds on this unit, and I saw this one guy, and he was walking through the day room. He was talking to his voices. You could hear one side of the conversation. So I kind of snuck up behind him, trying to, okay, what's he saying? And when I got close, he caught me. So he turns around, he's looking at me, and I said, "Oh, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you here before." And I said, "What's your name?" And he says, "I'm Jesus Christ." And I look at him and I think back and I go, "No, no, you're not Jesus Christ because I am." And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, now what's he going to do?" I was thinking back to what that abnormal psychology paper told me years ago. I said, "Is there any truth to this?" I finally had a chance to check it out. So I'm waiting. I'm sitting on pins and needles, waiting for his reaction to see if he would change from Jesus Christ to somebody else. And he's standing there and he's looking and he's thinking. His eyes are cocked up, and then he thinks about it, and then he looks at me and he goes, "We can both be Jesus Christ." And he strolled off. I went, "Okay, they lied to me about that. What else did they lie to me about?"
Right.
You know. So right away, my suspicion had increased, and I'm on the lookout for other stuff. So one of the things they told us was that the voices were hallucinations. Okay, they hammered that into your head. They're hallucinations. They're hallucinations. They're hallucinations. No research. Nobody studied it. Nobody did any studies on it. The psychiatric mafia just went, "We hereby declare that they're hallucinations because we said so."
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't trust them any more than I did anybody else. So, when I saw that these so-called hallucinations were running patterns, and two of those major patterns, the two first that I discovered, were that they were consistently negative.
Mm-hmm.
What held them negative? Why were they on a constant negative trajectory? Why weren't they random like hallucinations? And then another question was, what held them on that negative trajectory? Why weren't they random? I didn't know back then. All I knew is that this was a consistent pattern. They were consistently negative.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're consistently negative, what is holding them on a negative trajectory? Right? The second thing I saw was that they were anti-religious. They didn't like the Bible. They didn't like preachers. They didn't like the church. They didn't like anything spiritual at all. The patients who I started questioning patients who went to church because they felt like something's wrong, something's evil, something's bad. I'm going to go to church and see if I can't fix this. Those people who decided to do that broke into three different sections. If the voices were weak, when they entered the church, the voices would shut up. If the voices were moderately strong, when they went in the church, they would kick up and try to drown out everything the preacher was saying. Okay? If they were very strong, they would actually drive them out of the church. These people will get up and run out of the church. Okay? So why would a hallucination be anti-religious? Why would a hallucination care? Okay? Those were only the first of 23 that popped up over time. And all these patterns are on my website under articles. So it what the psychiatric mafia did is first they blamed it on mothers. They said, "Oh, the mothers screwed something up. They did something to make their sons or daughters psychotic." And the mothers went, "Hey, we didn't do anything." So that was visible. So what they did, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma, they kicked it up to it's a genetic disorder. They got away with that for like 10 years until the geneticists caught up with them and said, "We don't find a schizophrenia gene.
Yeah.
There is none." So then they needed to have some reason because they didn't know what caused schizophrenia. They didn't want to see what caused schizophrenia. They didn't even want to look there. They were making billions of dollars selling their antipsychotic drugs. They don't want a cure for schizophrenia. They have reduced research into schizophrenia down to a dribble. They're making $14 billion selling these toxic antipsychotic drugs right now. They don't want a cure. All right. So it was easy to debunk the mothers. So they kicked it up to a place where 99% of the population could not investigate genetics. You had to be a biogeneticist in order to debunk that. It took a decade or so, but they finally did. Well, we don't find any genetic gene. So then what they did was said, "Oh, well, it's a combination of genes." Well, we don't see any combination of genes either. So that fell by the wayside. So then they had to find something else that they could put as a cause that people couldn't look at. You know, how many people are geneticists, and of those, how many are wanting to look into schizophrenia? Very few. So they got away with that for a decade or so. So then they came up with the biochemical imbalance. Okay, that was come up by Eli Lilly,
Yep.
a pharmaceutical company. Back when Prozac came out, it was completely fabricated. It was made up. They knew it was a lie at the time. They put it out anyway.
Yep.
So now the universities and big pharma ran with it. They're still putting that out. They're still in their advertisements. Here's one I got. Here's one I printed out not too long ago. Matter of fact, it was August 5th, 2023. So now this is from a major publication. Okay, Cleveland Clinic put this out, and it's what causes schizophrenia and does it have any triggers? One of the first things they list: chemical imbalances in your brain. The chemicals involved are those in your brain that are used to communicate. This has been debunked years ago, and they're still publishing it. It's ridiculous. These people are scammers of the worst degree. You know,
Yeah,
that
and what's interesting is schizophrenia isn't the only disorder that's followed that pattern, right?
no,
There's
no, it's
many where
all
the
mental illness.
yeah,
All mental illness. Now Ronald Pies, this is a one of the top researchers in psychiatry. He says the demise of the chemical imbalance theory in view of the mounting evidence against it after more than 20 years of being told the chemical imbalance in the brain causes mental illness, such as anxiety disorder and depression. The theory was finally put to rest when Ronald Pies, the editor-in-chief emeritus of the Psychiatric Times, stated in July 11th, 2011, I believe it was, issue he, uh, of the Psychiatric Times, he said, I don't believe I have ever heard a knowledgeable, well trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim that mental patients have a chemical imbalance, except that to mock it. In truth, the chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded by well informed psychiatrists. And then it goes on to other people say, oh, Harvard, the chemical imbalance theory is a sort of last century thinking. Neuroscientist Joseph Coyle of Harvard Medical School says this. You know, the truth is that they don't have any idea what the chemical balance of the brain is or even what it should be. You know, so here's some of the top people in the field saying this is a bunch of bunk, and here's the Cleveland Clinic still publishing that mental illness is due to a chemical imbalance of the brain with no evidence whatsoever. Okay,
wow,
so what I noticed when I was on the front lines was, okay, if the chemical imbalance, then the psychiatrist should be taking some kind of reference measurement.
right,
Like, okay, if there's a chemical imbalance of the brain, what's out of balance and how much? You know, there should be some kind of blood test or EEG or EKG or some kind of hardcore scientific diagnostic test to measure what's out of balance and by how much. I never saw one. Never did I ever see a psychiatrist. And even today, you know, those of you who believe this chemical imbalance lie, if you go to a psychiatrist, you watch and see if he gives you any kind of test to see what's out of balance or by how much. They won't do that. They'll look at you. You'll come out of that psychiatric office with some kind of drug that has toxic side effects, but you won't see them take any kind of measurement as to what biochemicals are out of balance or by how much because they don't know. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's a fabrication, it's a lie, it's a deception upon the entire planet.
yep,
You know? And they're
for
getting
sure,
away with this. You
yeah,
know? So that was the first thing I noticed. You know,
yep,
that didn't make sense. Okay. If it's a chemical imbalance, why aren't they taking some kind of ground measurement? Why aren't they taking a baseline of some kind? It's just not happening. You know, so I asked one psychiatrist one day, I said, where's the baseline? How come you guys aren't testing? Oh, the drug companies do that for us. It's already handled, you know. And I'm like, you know, in the back of my, I'm thinking, what is the matter with you? That's like letting the fox loose in the hen house. You know, what are you thinking? Of course, I couldn't say that to them because they're so friggin' arrogant, they'd go nuts. You know, so here's all these things that are not lining up. They're not making sense. You know, so that was the second one. You know, so the voices are running patterns. This biochemical imbalance thing isn't making any sense. This genetic theory was debunked a long time ago. The bottom line is they don't know what causes schizophrenia. They have no idea. And they're not looking into the voices, which are the main symptoms of it's one of the main symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, one of the most common types of schizophrenia. They're not even looking at it. And they
yep.
won't let anybody else. I got in trouble twice when patients told the psychiatrist that I was asking them what their voices were telling them. I was called up and I was ordered to stop asking them those questions. Nor was anybody else in that entire psychiatric hospital that I saw interested in what these voices were telling the patients. So that struck me as odd. I mean, I wanted to know what the voices were telling them because it was a big part of what was going on with them. You know, but Nobody else was the least bit interested. Okay, so here's all these things that didn't make sense. They just didn't line up. Um, they all these contradictions, and I'm like, okay, what's with this stuff? You know? So
Yeah. So just on that note, so I grew up with several people close to me who had severe mental illness. One severe bipolar, another schizophrenic, and even when I was a kid, they were still doing. Uh, they almost did electric shock therapy, right? Even at my time, 20 years ago, and
oh, good you didn't get that.
yeah, it wasn't for me. It was they were proposing it for a loved one, but I've heard you just talk about all of the horrendous treatment that these people got over history. You know, you outlined some earlier on our call here, but you also, lobotomies, electric shock, all of these things, and so I'm curious, because I think one of the biggest things holding back not just the medical institution but science, all of this, is the almost religious adherence to materialism, right? That they have to
Yep,
explain everything through a
right,
mechanistic worldview, right? And so for me, I get
right,
that Rockefeller was ultimately motivated by money. I'm sure people
right.
at the top today are motivated by money, but I'm sure a lot of these psychiatrists also motivated by money. But I know a lot of them are probably very well meaning, but they're stuck in this materialistic worldview and model. So I guess, do you think there's any way for people to kind of take some of the insights you've garnered without, having to accept that these are actual entities? Or, yeah, I'd be curious.
Well, that because that's what they are.
Yeah.
That's what they are. These things are entities. They speak in complete sentences. They invade the person's um, thought processes, and so we're surrounded by these things. They have to, at some level, have your permission
Mm-hmm.
to enter.
Yep.
Okay, so uh, you look at what's happening today. I mean, these Satanists all over the place. This hard rock music with satanic messages in it. This backmasking stuff. I mean, you look at this. These trans fools taking over. The rights of everybody.
Yeah.
You know that males competing in female sports. I mean, everything's upside down. I mean, this is a humongous battle between good and evil going on right now. People need to wake up. You know, these voices are, you could call them demons because that's what they act like.
Right.
They're completely destructive. And if you go through those 23 patterns I outlined, you'll see that they're very destructive. They hate the human race. They hate the person they invade. They are parasites. They drain their energy.
Yep.
So and what makes them so devastating is they sound just like your normal thoughts coming through your head. The thousands of thoughts you have every day. So they come and they enter your thought stream and they put thoughts into your thought stream. So your thoughts they're they're energetic. These entities are energetic.
Yeah.
After a shock treatment, they disappear for a while. They apparently don't like electricity.
Yep. Wow. What's so amazing is I've been interviewing several authors, all different backgrounds. Some talking about extraterrestrials and Christians and all of that. And so much of what you say lines up exactly with what these people are talking about. So I'm very thankful for your work and the fact that you're bringing all this to the surface, and a lot of the pieces are connecting. I'd just be curious first, Jerry, were you a religious person going into schooling?
I kind of, but not much. I mean, I didn't go to, I had a bad experience in the, this is one of the things with not trusting authority. Uh, and I was in the Boy Scouts. I was going for the Scout merit badge. badge rank there. And one of the things we had to do back then, it wasn't like today. We had to memorize the entire Morse code.
Okay, yep.
You know, that wasn't fun. So I jumped through all the hoops. I met all the requirements, and my dad went to my scoutmaster and said, I wouldn't give him that rank. He's not reverend. He doesn't go to church.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so here I was held up. You know, the scoutmaster saying, "No, I'm not going to give you the rank. You don't go to church." So I
Yeah.
said, "Okay, how long do I have to go to church?" He said 6 months. I said, "Okay, 6 months. It is." I went to church. The scoutmaster contacted the preacher. Didn't learn much in the church. Saw that the preacher was having an affair with one of the parishioners. I mean, that
Yep.
was clear.
I've been there
Okay,
too.
so I learned that, and then I got done my 6 months. I said, "Okay, I'm done my 6 months. Here, give me the rank." And he contacted the preacher, and the preacher said, "Yeah, yeah, he attended regularly, but he didn't set the world on fire." So the scoutmaster comes back and goes, "Well, looks like you didn't get much out of that. Not giving you the rank." I said, "You broke your word. I quit. I'm done with the scouts." And I quit. You know. So he gave me that rank, like maybe 20 years later, a few years before he died.
Right.
He realized the error of his ways. Right. But
Yeah.
that turned me against religion for a long while. So, I believed in God. I believed there was a God. I wasn't any holy roller or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't read the Bible a whole lot. I didn't pray a whole lot. But once I got into the state hospital and I saw what was going on, I went, well, if there's this kind of evil going on with these
Yeah.
people, there's got to be a flip side of it. When I saw that these voices could not stand the Bible, they could not stand the 23rd Psalm. A patient told me one time when he repeated the 23rd Psalm, those voices reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Wow.
So I started thinking, well, there must be something to this religious stuff. you know.
Yeah.
So
I,
I came at it from the opposite direction.
yeah.
So I'm going, okay, if the negative side exists, the positive side must also exist. So I
Yeah.
went looking on the positive side also.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. I've been the same. I was actually raised by a pastor. He turned out to like have an affair. He was a really bad person. I've seen so much horrible stuff in the name of God and deferred, and given grace because the person is in a position of authority. There's great pastors out there. I know great pastors. Most of it, though, honestly, it's just a weird cult and narcissism in these churches. But when you start to really understand the nature and reality of evil, it shakes you awake. That's for damn
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it does. And I started having things happen to me that proved beyond a doubt that there was a greater force on this planet than these evil things. Okay.
Yeah.
And I went searching. I was searching for the positive side. I went through Sai Baba. I went through Christian Science. I would go to these different religions and just take what I could out of them. But even in a lot of them, I found stuff that didn't match up. So I just took what I could use and left the rest. So I would go through one after another, after another, after another, after another. You know, and each time gaining more of an electric approach to what God is and how He operates. And the one I found the most useful was the writings of a Christian mystic called Emanuel Swedenborg, who lived some 300 years ago.
Okay.
He was one of the top scientists of his day. He was like the Leonardo da Vinci of his day. He was highly educated. He was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden. He invented all these different kinds of things. He was like a physician and a chemist and I mean, all these things. And at age 50, he saw a vision of Christ, and it said, "Okay, now drop all this physical world stuff. I want you to to go. We're going to give you access to heaven and hell. You go there and you come back and you write about it. Okay. So as I started reading that stuff, I saw that what he saw in hell matched exactly what these voices that the schizophrenics were hearing were saying.
Right.
And then there was another clinical psychologist in California who worked at a state hospital in California, wrote a book called The Presence of Other Worlds. And he was seeing the same thing I was seeing. That these voices matched exactly what Swedenborg was saying these evil spirits were and how they behaved on the other side. So I started having these experiences with these things. So I had both positive and negative experiences. I had a bunch of miracles come my way that were just earth-shakingly rattled me, that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was a God and there was something that was more powerful going on than what I see in physical reality. I mean, it would just, and these weren't just light things. These weren't just, I mean, they were earth-shaking things. I could tell you one if you want me to.
Please do, Jerry.
Okay. I was going for my commercial pilot's license in high performance sailplanes. Okay, these didn't have engines. They tow you up into the sky, turn you loose, and you would go in the purest form of flight, but no engine. You only had one chance at landing. If you blew it, you were done. You couldn't go back up and go around like in a power plane.
Right.
So I already had my private license, and I was going for my commercial, and the instructor I had he was a kind of an arrogant. I flew with him in the Civil Air Patrol. He was like an ex-Marine. He had a big ego. And what would happen is that if they signed you off for the commercial flight test and you failed it, the FAA instructor had to drive from Phoenix to Tucson to give that test. And if you failed it, he's not a happy camper because he's going to have to come back again. So my instructor kept making things more and more difficult, and he would just drag this on and on and on and on. And I'm watching other pilots that were much less trained than I was getting their licenses. And I'm thinking, this guy is never going to let me loose. So one day we're walking out to the plane, and it's a two-place plane. The pilot would sit in the front, student in the back. So the instructor would always let us sit in the front. I mean, because you can have full view. Okay, but we were practicing emergency landings that day. Okay, what you had to do was you had to have super precise airspeed and altitude control, because you had 250 feet to land that glider. That thing weighed close to 1,000 pounds with two of us in it. It had a big steel nose skid on the nose. So there weren't any brakes to it. You just had to plow that thing into the ground, and that steel nose skid would dig into the dirt runway, and you'd just be plowing up dirt like a tractor.
That's awesome.
Dirt would be flying everywhere. You'd be digging a trench. So if you went 1 inch over that 250-foot marker, you failed. So that's not a lot of space to land a 1,000-pound airplane.
Nope.
So you had to be falling out of the air. You had to be stalling by the time you crossed that first cone, and you had to be low in order to hit the ground and stop before you hit that second cone. Now, I've had some bad experiences with gliders on approach or on landing where I hit a downdraft and it almost smashed me into the ground. So you don't have any engine that you can, torque that throttle and gain altitude. You have to push the nose down to gain speed to move out of something like that. So I was already low to the ground. This thing's pushing me into the ground. I'm about to crash, and I had to nose down even further to get out of that downdraft. Never forgot that. Wow. So on every landing after that, I carried maybe 50 feet of extra altitude because you could lose that altitude in a heartbeat.
Yep.
They have these dive brakes on the wings. You just pop those things and you drop like a rock. If that doesn't do it, you can turn the plane sideways, and the whole side of the plane serves as an air brake. I mean, it wasn't any problem losing altitude. It was a problem getting it back.
Right.
So here I am coming in on final approach. I knew what I was doing. I was carrying, maybe 50 feet more altitude than, the instructor would have, but no problem losing it. So as we're walking out to the plane, he says, "You're flying from the rear seat today." I'm going, "Well, what do you mean I'm flying from the rear seat? I'm not going to take the test from the rear seat. I can't see past your fat head in the rear seat. Your head and shoulders block the runway. I can't see anything." He goes, "You're flying from the back seat." And I'm going, this guy, I was furious. I was absolutely furious. So here we are going around. You run the pattern. I'm on final approach. I'm carrying 50 feet of extra altitude, maybe some less. On final approach, I'm watching those cones, and you going back and forth from one side to another, trying to see those cones on the ground past his fat head. And we're coming down, we're at maybe 100 feet or so, come on final approach, and he says, "Where are you?" I says, "I'm high." And he says, "Okay, I got the ship." I'm going, and I was absolutely furious. It's my approach. I had it under control, and he takes control of the ship. Why? But by federal law, I have to turn it over to him because he's the pilot in command now. Okay, so I have to hands off the controls, and I'm just boiling, just boiling. Next thing I know, he stalls the plane. He stalls it. It's no longer flying. We're less than 100 feet above the ground. The dive brakes are full out, and I'm looking at him like, did he have a heart attack? Did he have a stroke? He's sitting upright, rigid. So he's not humped over like he had a stroke or anything. It was like he's just sitting there rigid. And I'm going, he's not flying. The plane's not flying. If he doesn't put in those drive brakes, he's not going to regain control of the plane. And he's just sitting there like a lump on a log, just steering straight ahead as the ground is coming up, and we're at a 45-degree angle headed for the ground. So
Wow.
I did something which was technically illegal. His name was Jerry too. So I said, "Jerry, I'm putting in the dive brakes." So I put in the dive brakes, closed them, and locked them. Now he has a chance for the plane to start flying again. With the dive brakes out, it wasn't going to fly anymore. It's heading for the ground. It's not flying. It's stalled out. So we're going down, and as we're going down, usually I'm all jumping all over the place with something like that. I mean, I don't just sit still in an emergency like that. I'm doing stuff. But I had this very strong feeling come over me. It's almost like drinking a pint of Jack Daniels or something. I mean, it was just this very strong, calm feeling. And if I had to put it into words, would be, everything's going to be fine. Watch the show. But I'm looking out the window, and he's still not flying the plane. But I'm feeling, it was like this absolute knowing that everything's going to be okay. But you look out around you, it's not okay. We're still heading for the ground at a 45-degree angle. He's still not flying the plane. He's just sitting there upright, frozen, And I'm going, but it didn't bother me. It was like, it made no sense to me. What I was feeling made no sense to me in terms of what I was seeing outside of the canopy. So finally, at the last minute, we're probably maybe 50 feet above the ground. He starts flying the plane. And by then, we're no longer lined up on the runway for a straight-in approach. He's off to the side at a perpendicular angle. I have no idea how the plane got there. By the time I closed the dive brakes and looked out the window, we flew through the tree, and I looked where the runway was. The runway was off to my left. We were no longer lined up with the runway.
Wow.
Right? So he flies through the top of the tree, and the strut of the wing cuts off one of the branches. The side of the plane was open, and I had the window down, and I'm looking out the window, and here's this branch comes tumbling by my window because the strut cut one of the branches of the tree, cut it right off, and it just went whizzing by the window. That's how low we were. Okay? So I look out the window, and here's this barbed wire fence in front of the runway. So even if we did get past that fence, if we didn't get past that fence, the barbed wire would cut through that canopy and cut both our heads off. You know, that canopy and our necks aren't going to stop a 1,000-pound sailplane.
Yeah.
Our heads are going to go off. But I'm still sitting there calm as a cucumber. It made no sense to me. Curious, with this absolute knowing that everything's going to be okay. But rationally, it could not be.
Yeah.
I mean, we're less than 50 feet above the ground. We just flew through a tree. We lost a lot of energy cutting the top of that tree off. You know, we're down on the ground, probably close to in ground effect now. And I'm looking out the window going, are we going to make that fence? We are? No, no, maybe, no, yeah, no. I couldn't tell whether we were going to clear that fence or not. Even if we cleared that fence, we don't no longer have a long strip. We got 35 feet of runway, which is perpendicular. That's not enough to stop that plane even under emergency conditions. And on the other side of the runway is this deep pit with a mound of dirt in the back of it. So rationally, even if we dropped onto that 35 feet of runway and he plowed that nose into the ground, we're still going to slide into that pit and into that mound of dirt. And the front of that plane was only fiberglass. He's going to die. And I'm probably, I don't know if I'd survive. If I did, I'd be seriously hurt. You know, but here's this absolute knowing that everything's going to be okay, and this feeling like, sit back and watch the show, you know. And I'm like, this can't be. You know, I'm not reacting like I normally would ever react in a situation like that. I'm calm as a cucumber, curious about how we're going to get out of this, knowing that somehow we are, but it made no sense in terms of physics and flight and everything I knew about aircraft that we were going to survive this. There's no way. There's no way. But there was such absolute knowing that everything was going to be fine. So I'm watching. He barely clears that barbed wire fence. And then he jams full right rudder. The whole side of the plane becomes an air brake. And what didn't make any sense is now that the wing trip is now moving in the direction we're traveling. The whole side of the plane is going sideways. Okay. So what should have happened is we should have hit the ground, and then the momentum should have slammed the plane's wing into the ground and broke it to pieces. That's not what happened. The plane stalled, dropped like 20 feet straight down, slammed into the ground, and just balanced on the wheel. Just sat there and balanced. The wings were flat out. Instead of it hitting the ground and flopping over and breaking that wing, it just balanced. And it stopped, and it just balanced there for a few seconds with the wings just level on the ground. This big cloud of dust flying up in the air. All these people from the sailport porch come running over. They're dead. You know, like what? There's a serious crash. And that plane's just balanced on the ground, and then it just slowly tips over and falls on the wing. And I'm sitting there like totally amazed. It shouldn't have. This shouldn't have happened. We should be dead. You know. And he's sitting there in the front seat, and I'm looking at him. He's not moving. Finally, he moves. He opens up the canopy. He doesn't say a word. We both get out. Didn't say a word to each other. We both walk around that plane looking. You could hear the wings oil can when it hit. They were metal wings, and you could hear like an oil drum, crunching. We circle that entire plane, and there's not a scratch on it. There's no damage whatsoever at all. And I'm just completely blown away. These people run up, from the porch, and I look at him, and I said, Jerry, what happened? And he looks at me and he goes, I don't know. I don't know how he ever talked his way out of that one.
Yeah.
So in things like that would happen to me. So it was like, okay, if you don't believe there's a God, explain this.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be talking to you right now. I should be dead.
Yeah, I've had four times when I should have been dead and was fractions of a second.
Yeah, me
one
too.
actually, twice motorcycling actually. One time I hit a car at T-boned it at 70 kilometers an hour head on.
Oh,
and I walked away. walk,
Oh, whoa.
and all the EMS people, they all said you should be dead, buddy. I've seen, and it happened in slow mo. When I hit it, time slowed down, and it felt like I just barely tapped it, right? And then their whole back of their car was just mangled, and I only had a 250cc little dirt bike, totally crumbled, and yeah, a few others as well. But it's proof for God for me, but it also feels that there's a responsibility now. It's like, hey, you know, I feel like God has saved me and protected me. It almost feels like a responsibility that like, what are you gonna do
Yeah,
with your life now?
right, right. You can't be acting like an idiot like before.
Yeah, yeah, it's heavy. Eh?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the ultimate blessing, and then it feels like the ultimate responsibility. And part of me feels like the rest of my life is it's just under God's will now. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, you should have died, you didn't. So, like, God, tell
So,
me what you need me to do. Like,
right.
yeah,
I'm in the same place.
yeah, yeah,
I'm the exact same place. I got hit by an old lady who was like 2 weeks out of a heart uh, operation. I was coming out of the prison, and there's this curve and this hill, so you couldn't see around it. I looked to my left, I looked to my right. I didn't look to the left again, which was a bad mistake. I pulled out into the road. I saw her coming. She had me T-boned. I mean, I was in the middle of the road
yeah,
and was on a gold wing. She's coming at me at a high speed. I didn't want to turn the throttle so fast that it would hesitate, because if it hesitated,
yeah,
I'd be dead.
yeah.
you know. So I tried to do it as quick as I could without risking that hesitation, and she clipped me. Okay,
Ah,
I ended up on the side of the road with my foot in the opposite direction it should have been,
yeah,
180 degrees. So my toes were pointed where my heel should be. Right? I couldn't get up. I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn off the motorcycle, so the engine burned out. But I talked to a guy a couple of years later who witnessed that accident, and I said, "What did you see?" He was
uh,
coming in a truck from the other direction.
mm-hmm.
He said, "I saw you got hit," and he said it looked like something was carrying you over the road and laid you down in the gutter.
Wow.
I never forgot that. I have metal plates in my leg from that accident, but there was another one where I should have been dead. So, and there were things like that would happen all the time, or not all the time, but like wake up calls, like,
Yeah,
hey, there's something going on here that beyond what you think. Yeah. And I think one of the calls that I have is to wake people up to the fact that these voices that schizophrenics are hearing are not hallucinations.
yeah,
They are evil, demonic entities bent on destroying those people and anybody around them.
yeah. It definitely ties back in there. And again, yeah, I really want to thank you for your work. A few quick questions though, and then I really want to get into kind of the nature of the entities themselves, all of that. But I've heard you say in other podcasts that they're also sensitive to other religions, right? Like, I know in the Muslim traditions, they talk a lot about the jinn, and there's a general,
Right.
higher understanding amongst the Muslim population about these types of entities and their reality, whereas most Christians in the West, they just think it's a far off concept, right? So,
You know
uh,
what? And that's the work of these negative entities. That's exactly what they want. The most deceptive thing that the devil has ever done was to make people believe that he doesn't exist. you know and the psychiatry wants people to believe that these things aren't demons, that they're hallucinations. you know
right,
you can look at that list of patterns that I have in my website and see them for yourselves. You don't have to be a biochemist or a geneticist. You can see these things for yourself. Anybody who has a schizophrenic child or family member can see these patterns for themselves. If they're running patterns, they're not hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia insists. These are demonic entities. They are parasites. They actually suck the energy out of these people. You can talk to them and say, how do you feel before the voices come? And how do you feel after the voices come? Okay. I did that with a score of patients. And then we ran a statistical analysis of variance on it, and it came out statistically significant. They felt significantly drained after the voices attacked them. There was a marked lack of energy after these things attacked them than as before.
Right. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, obviously you have from what you're telling me, Christian leanings. I think that would be fair to say. Do you think, in terms of armor or protection against these guys, do you see Christianity or Jesus as unique in terms of a way one can protect people from this, or do you think Muslims or other faiths as well, like calling on God of their understanding, is equally as effective?
Yeah, the Muslims are much more aware of these things than we are. Matter of fact, they have their they have their own prayer. I mean, to get rid of these things. Um, it's in the Quran. It's a very short, powerful prayer. Chapter 114 of the Quran says, "In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, say the following: I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer." So they're aware that these things whisper things in people's minds. They whisper to them. Who whispers into the hearts of people from among the jinn and among the people. Right?
Wow.
So they are much more aware that these things are out there and affecting them than I think Christians are.
Yep.
That's very dangerous. That's
Yeah.
very dangerous. The Christianity has kind of, oh no, we don't want to pay attention to that. We'll just pay attention to the good things. Thing is, that leaves them wide open. It's
Yep.
like being in a dark room full of rattlesnakes and not realizing that they're there. You're going to get bit in the butt. They
Yeah.
are there. They're getting everybody. Everybody has thoughts that pop into their head that are completely negative, telling them to do something that they would never normally do. That's them.
Yeah.
They put those thoughts in your head. And I've had scores of schizophrenics ask these things. Who are you? What are you? What do you think their answer was?
I'm you.
Yep, we're you. And if you believe that, you become them.
Right. Wow. So, yeah, it's heavy stuff. I'd be curious. Do you think also though it's a double-edged sword? Do you think somebody being aware of these entities could also leave you open for attack? And because my understanding as well is they didn't like you prodding around,
No, they
right?
didn't. They didn't. Not at all. So, they will go after if they can bring down a preacher, that's a big one. Like the preacher you talked about, like the one that affected me, you know, um, there's many different kinds and they specialize in different areas, you know, and there's a hierarchy of them. There's some that are the leaders and they command the others, and they have these specialties that they move in. It's like pornography, um, blasphemy, adultery, you know, all this kind of stuff. You know, they're behind that. It'd probably be safe to say that any sin committed by a human being is motivated by these things, because you're born pure. You don't have any evil entities in you when you're born.
Right. Right. So,
So
do you think? Go ahead.
pushing them away and saying, oh, we're just going to ignore them and concentrate on the good side is leaving you open for attack.
Mm,
You need to be aware of them. They're constantly at you. They're at all of us.
yeah. 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 Okay. I appreciate that. I so first, I want to start with the schizophrenics because I know several schizophrenics, and almost exclusive to all of them is a very deep belief in God, in that they are being attacked. Right there is this demonic, good versus evil. That's their lives, right? It really feels like they're like, even when I was a child, I concluded what your work has concluded, that it seems real to me. Like I just knew. I'm like, yeah, these guys are actually suffering this, and people are like, no, no, no. Um, but I'd be curious, not what makes schizophrenics unique. Is it the fact that they've had trauma? Is trauma a prerequisite? Like what? Like
Trauma is one of the biggest factors involved in all mental illness.
right,
Trauma, and the deeper the trauma, the more substantial the mental illness. So you look at, I found this not long ago. You look at what's happening on the planet. In the past 200 years, over 100 million people on the planet have lost their lives because of war.
yep,
War is propagated by these evil entities. Over a time span of 3,358 years, only 234 of those years were peaceful.
yep,
So you look at what's going on in this planet, and when when God banished Satan, he didn't banish him to a hell, he banished him to the earth. They
right,
were sent to the earth. They are the rulers of this planet. They can't communicate unless they can take over a person.
right,
So, and their access to physical reality is through taking over people
yep.
and getting them to do their bidding. If they can't do that, they don't have a voice.
Yeah, it's this concept. It keeps coming up again and again of disembodied spirits. Some say it's the Nephilim. They came down, interbred, they died, but their spirit was trapped here, kind of in the astral, right? And well, maybe we could get into that. So, I mean, you've started to lay it out here, but can you paint us a picture of your worldview? Like, what is reality? Where are we? Where are these entities? How does the interaction work? I'd just be very curious to understand your worldview in that respect.
Well, I can tell you some of that. I mean, what is reality is
Yeah, a bit of
that's like this dark hole that just keeps, the deeper you go into it, the more complicated it gets. But yeah, we're surrounded by these things. So I think for anybody who really wants to dig deep into what spiritual reality is I would recommend they go to a book called Heaven and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg.
okay.
Okay, he talks of that. Now there's another fellow who wrote. Uh, Let me see. He died and was given a tour of hell. Um,
Whoa.
I have his name somewhere. His writings are fascinating. What did I do with it? Hold on, let me see if I can find that real quick.
Yeah, no problem. I just found Heaven and Hell. Yeah, guys, the PDF's free online. I'm gonna definitely check that out. I hadn't heard about this guy, but I've heard you reference him, Swedenborg, a few times.
Emanuel Swedenborg. Yeah, he wrote Heaven and Hell and a bunch of other uh, important stuff.
Wow. Okay, I'll definitely
I can
check him
find
out.
this. I'm looking for it.
heaven and its wonders, and hell, from things.
I got the speech app. I don't know if guys can hear it, but it's in the voice of Snoop Dogg. So I've been listening to like spiritual texts in Snoop Dogg's voice. Somehow makes it extra badass. But yeah, yeah, guys, heaven and hell, heaven and its wonders and hell, from things heard and seen. Emmanuel Swedenborg, Borg. Very fascinating stuff.
Oh, shoot. Random city. Okay.
Oh yeah, they heard it on the stream. Here, I'll play, guys. The while you guys are listening, I'll play it in Snoop Dogg's voice.
1.
You won't be able to hear it,
The
Jimmy, but
Lord,
they can.
speaking
Okay,
in the
I
presence
can't
of his
find it.
disciples of the consummation of the age, which is the final period of the church, one says,
No,
near
I
the end of
can't
what
find
he
it.
foretells about its
I got it
successive
somewhere, but I
states
can't
in
find it.
respect to love and faith.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Just having a little fun there. Um, yeah, but so I've been interviewing people. They speak about the extraterrestrial agendas, Christians about the Nephilim, and a lot of them are painting a picture. And then also in my own research, I'm very interested in non-local consciousness and like simulation theory, holographic universe theory. And as far as I can tell, my kind of current worldview is that our current reality is almost like a shared or collective dream, right? Like when we peer deeper and deeper into the atom and nature of reality, it's all empty, and it seems to manifest from the spiritual realm. That the spiritual realm or astral
Yes.
realm, what have you, is paramount or more fundamental, and that we exist in both. And that we have entities in these other realms, and that time doesn't exist for them in the same way that it exists here. And so
Right.
these guys are
There
actually
is no
very,
time, space, or matter in the energetic realm.
yeah,
That's why the voices can follow these people to the end of the earth, because there is no time, there is no space for these things.
yes, yeah. And I actually had a question from one of my favorite supporters, Wendy. Hello, Wendy. She asked about the concept of generational curses. So obviously, trauma is generational, right? But do you think there's truth in that as well? The
I think so.
generational component,
Yeah, they call it familiar spirits.
familiar
Yes,
spirits.
I do believe they will follow um, through generations, and a lot of it, you know, I think I think a part of it, or a big part of it, is that the schizophrenic mother or father sets up the conditions in the child for the spirit to move over into them.
Right.
Because people who are raised by schizophrenic parents have usually horrible experiences.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there is a familiar pattern to that. But you I think what you have to do is watch what's coming into your mind, because everybody hears a voice rambling in their mind all the time. It's constantly prattling away, telling you stuff you already know,
Yeah.
telling you all kinds of stuff, you know. So people believe that voice is who they are.
Yeah.
But if that's true, then who is listening to it?
Exactly. You are the awareness. That's,
You are
yeah.
the awareness. That voice that's prattling in your head is not you.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting is I used to really follow Eckhart Tolle and, kind of Eastern thought as well. And they point to this concept of the ego, right? Which is the false self, that we form identities around, that, we convince are us, but it's not really us. And, I see a lot of parallels between that kind of train of thought and kind of your worldview as well. But more, people are really pointing out the fact that, no, these really are external entities to us. It's not just something within our head. Is there other evidence that you would have, say, for the skeptic about their nature being, interdimensional or spirits? Like, do they? Because I've heard you reference that sometimes they have knowledge that there's no way that the patient could have had, or things like that. So maybe you could talk to that for the skeptics who are like, look, it's just in their head. Yes, trauma is there, but there's nothing supernatural, if you will, about this. What would be your?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll tell you, have the patient repeat the 23rd Psalm and ask them how they react to it. That ought to be enough in and of itself.
Right.
You know? I'd say, here, read this and tell me what your voices do after you read it. That ought to be enough right there. Now I got my last 10 years I spent working in hospital emergency rooms doing psych crisis, because doctors don't know what to do with these guys. They just want them out of their emergency rooms. Right? So that was my job, was to figure out whether they were safe enough to release, whether they had to be hospitalized, whether they could go home, whether they needed to be sent to a mental health center, whether they were suicidal or homicidal. I mean, just, what are we going to do with these people? I got to the point where I could actually feel these entities. It was like this icky electrical feeling. There's no other feeling like it on the planet that I've ever experienced. Just like this icky electrical feeling, and I could tell how strong they were and how angry they were by how intense that feeling was. But having them repeat the 23rd Psalm and asking them how the voices react to it should be enough in and of itself.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and what's funny...
Or holy water. Get some holy water, pour it on them. Watch what happens.
Yeah. It burns. It burns. Yeah, and you talk about electricity. So I've had these sensations where I feel like I'm being attacked, and I get these like pins and needles and like heat, and yeah, it feels like electric. Would that be similar? Like, have you had any, I guess, serious spiritual attacks, if you will, in your own life that you're comfortable sharing?
Oh yeah,
to
learn. They tried to kill me. It was like, while I was working, I could not talk about this stuff.
Right.
I mean, I'd be fired within weeks. Matter of fact, I dropped my license because I knew they would go after it. They'd drum something up, so I just let it expire. So I got a clean slate because they would have dirtied it up. But I started speaking with a guy named Robert Stanley. He kind of talked me into it, and I said, okay, I'll speak, but you need to put me under some false name.
Okay. Yep.
So started that, and then when I got up to who was it? It was one of the largest podcasters in the U.S. He had arranged for me to be on his show. Okay, and that was great. So I was down in Mexico 2 weeks before this. I was supposed to go on with him, and went to bed one night normally. Woke up in the morning and my shoulder was killing me. I couldn't move my arm, and it was getting more and more intense by the hour. It came out of absolutely nowhere. So I was with a friend down there, and we were in his condo, and after a day of that, I said, I got to get back to the U.S. I'm not going to go to the Mexican hospital for this. So finally, he drove back because I couldn't use that arm at all. Got into the emergency room that night, and it turned out that a staph explosion, or a staph infection, had exploded in my right shoulder. Came out of absolutely nowhere. I didn't even know you could get a staph infection in your shoulder. I always thought it was in your throat. So went in there, they hospitalized me immediately, and the next day they operated. And I was on intravenous IVs for like 6 months to kill this thing.
Wow.
It blew me out of that interview. I didn't have enough energy to even speak. I mean, it was deadly. They
Right.
told me had they not caught it when they did, it would have killed me. So that was like 2 weeks before I went on one of the biggest podcasts that I'd ever spoken on.
Wow.
Knocked me completely out of it.
Wow.
But the fellow waited 6 months until I was over it, and then I went on. And I basically told these things, you're going to have to kill me to shut me up.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I'm struggling with is I'm interviewing a lot of these people who are uncovering this, and it's the debate around consent, right? I see a lot of ways in which you have to allow them into your
Yes.
life, but
At
then
some level,
also,
you have to consent. At
yeah,
some level, you have to consent.
but they're also sneaky little buggers that they
Oh,
find
they're
any
very
little,
sneaky.
yeah, it's like it's not
They're
as clear
very
cut.
diabolical.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
diabolical
yeah.
is the
Like
term.
yeah, you can have one drink. You can yeah. So there's different kinds of spirits. There's a special spirit that goes with alcoholism.
Hmm.
And it's the person. It, once the alcoholic starts drinking, he's not the only one drinking. These other spirits are getting high also. They can't get high without a physical body.
Yeah.
So that they have to jump in when the person's guard gets when they get drunk enough to let down their guard. These things jump in and they take over the drinking for them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
same thing with drugging. Same thing with drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I spoke offline with a former. He was a high priest of a black magic cult who did like blood sacrifices. He's out now, and at a young age he had a near death experience, and ever since then the veil was very light for him. Right, he could see things that others couldn't, and he said during the rituals he could actually see spirits being imbibed into their blood rituals, right? See them feeding, see their ecstasy, see them going into people. And wow, I couldn't
Yeah,
imagine that. But, I haven't
yeah,
personally experienced that, but it a lot of what you're saying tracks with what I've been finding out from many different people. So it's very
yeah. We're
fascinating.
surrounded by them. We're surrounded by them. The belief that they don't exist is foolish.
Right.
It's like and minimizing how slimy and how sneaky and how devious they are is foolish also. You know, it, look at what shape the world is in right now. This is
Yep.
all due to them.
Right.
All this transvestite stuff, all this war, this craziness, uh, this this destroying the country, the destroying of the economy. This is all due to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I do agree, but I think just to push back on that it's because we are collectively derelict in our duty, right? It's
Yes.
they are ultimately weak creatures that are allowed in one way or another due to God. I mean, if you believe God is all powerful, all knowing, God is on some, for some reason allowing this, right? Everybody has different ideas, but it really is the fact that we don't have awareness, right? Collectively, like we are opting in some way. I don't think it's as clear cut as us, saying, yes, I want to be possessed, right? And it's very
No, no.
insidious, but uh,
Very insidious.
yeah,
Very sneaky.
yeah, it's just, for me, I just don't find that messaging empowering to be like, it's all their fault, and I know where that comes from, but my point is, we
Well,
do have,
yeah, you have control. You have free will. So,
yes,
you know, you're the one who listens to them. And the
yeah,
same thing with the schizophrenics. You don't have to believe what they say. That's your choice.
yes.
If you choose to believe what they say and you don't follow your conscience, then you're allowing them in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the exact same psychopaths work. There's this thing, well, there's this thing in the occult, it's called revelation of the method, right? And so it's like, we have to tell you what we're going to do beforehand, right? And then psychopaths also have this same trait where they can't, they can't help but actually brag about the fact that they're screwing you over. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'm just curious. You see a lot of parallels here between, CEOs who brag about the fact that, they're jacking up their pharmaceutical pill prices 20,000%, and in the occult world, them having to tell you in advance, before they do things to make rituals effective. And what you hear from, a lot of people covering similar topics to this, that there is this opting in, Yeah.
Right. So they tell you, you're aware, and if you consent to it, then you're part of it.
Yeah, for sure. What I'd be curious, because my understanding about schizophrenia is it's a progressive and degenerative disease. Obviously you wouldn't call it a disease.
No, it's not a disease.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just saying, that's the accepted view of schizophrenia, that it starts small and it progresses. So maybe you can walk people through a typical pattern of a schizophrenic, how it starts to manifest and then where it typically takes them, right? So my understanding is that most are heavily traumatized, severe, sexual, physical, psychological abuse at a young age. Then they start around puberty, usually hearing whispers, voices, take it from there.
Well, it starts in different ways, and I didn't think that it affected children until I started working in the emergency room and having to see some of these kids. Some of these kids are hearing voices, and they're young. They're 5, 6, 7 years old. I couldn't believe it. But usually it starts around 25, somewhere in there. For some reason, I have no idea why. I don't think they know why. And it may come suddenly. It may start gradually. I've seen it started a number of different ways. There was one fellow I was talking to where he started hearing this voice, and it would tell him, hey, go pick up that pencil, or go sit down in that chair. It's almost like, they've got a new vehicle to drive, and they're seeing how much control they have over it.
Right.
So sometimes it starts right away. It's not gradual. All of a sudden, they start hearing voices, and the voices start tormenting them. One of the things that they all need to figure out is what it is, because the voices want them to, see, we're taught from the time we're kids that every thought that comes into your mind belongs to you. So that's the predominant view of the planet right now, that your thoughts are who you are. Swedenborg will point out that's far from the truth. Your thoughts are affected by a lot of different things, including these voices. To put thoughts into your thought stream that sound just like your internal dialogue. So for the most part, it's not, you don't hear a voice that goes, yeah, I'm the voice. Yeah, I'm the, it's nothing like that. It sounds just like the tens of thousands of other thoughts that you have running through your head every day. Only it's telling you to do something or to think something that you normally would not think or do. Something drastic, jump off a bridge, drive your car into oncoming traffic, take that motorcycle curve at 200 miles an hour, crazy stuff that you normally would not act on. But it sounds just like your own internal dialogue. That's what makes it so sneaky. You have to watch what's coming into your thought stream. And the schizophrenic needs to figure out what's his thoughts and what are the thoughts of these things. Because if he doesn't, he's going to think that all those thoughts are his. And if he starts listening to what these entities are telling him to do, he will eventually become them. They will take over. They will take over his body. And the personality who used to live in that body will be locked up like in a prison cell.
Right. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So you're saying it's not always subtle. It can have a rapid onset.
Can
But
have a rapid onset. It can be subtle. It comes on in different ways. Meth is one of the
yeah.
most dangerous ways that it comes on. This meth that is pouring over our southern border right now is driving more people crazy than anything else I've ever seen. I
Yep.
mean, when I was working in the prison, a large majority of those prisoners had been on meth, went psychotic, and committed some kind of crime that got them in prison, and they were still hearing the voices. So I've talked to prisoners who said when they ran out of meth, the voices would tell them where to be and when to be there to get more meth. Okay, you still there?
Still here, Jerry.
Okay, I wondered because you dropped out there.
No, I just had cats invading my office and people in the background. So we're all good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the voices would tell them where to be and when to be there to get more meth, and some stranger would show up with meth. That happened over and over and over again. So the way that started was, they'd be on their trip, they'd be flying, they'd be feeling like Superman. When they came down, they started, even while they were high, they started hearing voices talking to them, saying
Yep.
things to them, and they would think, well, that's just a hallucination. When I come down, they'll go away, and that does happen. So, maybe 15, 20 times, 30 times, maybe more, they hear these voices while they're high, and then when they come down, they go away. So they attribute them to being hallucinations, and then one day they don't. They're there forever. That guy's just as psychotic as anybody who in the loony bin. And the prison is full of them. They lost their sanity using meth. The
Yep.
the prisoners called meth the devil's drug for good
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Me personally, I've had 3 or 4 friends just with meth die. And, cocaine is, it's no walk in the park. But a lot of people at least bounce back from that. But there's something about meth
Yes.
that it they never really get out of it ever. Yeah.
Well, I know some who have, but very few without some kind of damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some kind of damage, and your sanity is one of those. And meth
Yeah.
is a very, very dangerous drug.
Yes, it
The
is.
Germans were using it in World War II. They were filling their soldiers full of that stuff before battles.
Yeah. They were also
Hitler
really
was
into the
using it.
occult too, so maybe
Yeah.
there's a parallel
Yep.
there. Yeah, you have on your website here the the lies that voices constantly tell your patients. You'll never get what you want. Your dreams will never come true. Don't trust your intuition. Your desires and dreams are garbage. Don't watch comedy. You don't deserve to feel good. Don't treat yourself with respect. Others should treat you better. You are worthless. Yeah, it's fascinating because if you talk to schizophrenics, they hear that as a background noise constantly. Like, you're scum, you're evil, you're scum.
Right.
Yeah, jump in front of that car, you're scum. That person wants to kill you. Like, it's hell for these people, right? And
Yeah, it is. It
it's
is.
wow. And so my understanding is that you've developed a methodology to heal schizophrenia for the I know it's you have to be careful saying that, I guess, but
Well, in some cases, a combination of the stuff that I've learned and Mace has helped some of these people recover. But they have to get on a positive spiritual path and stay there.
right.
That's the bottom line. You know, they have to realize that they're on the verge of hell with this stuff. That this is a negative entity that's trying to take them over.
Yeah.
It is not a hallucination. It is not harmless. It is not word salad. This is an entity that has the intent to take them over. And it wants to get at all of us. It feeds off of misery. That's its food. The more miserable it can make people, the more it feeds.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's they call it spiraling, right? Where at first it's a soft whisper, and it takes you to identify with that, right? To put your connect with your emotion, and then exactly as you said, we're taught from birth, hey, every thought in your mind is your thought, right? So, and then you're like you're um, relating to these thoughts and incorporating them, and then that's what causes the spiral. You're like, I must be a sicko because I'm thinking these things, right? Like
Right.
only a sick
Right.
person would think about this, right? And that's when they have you. And so I guess your work with schizophrenics, before, you were dealing with kind of the worst of the worst, right? People who had been um, you know incarcerated, presumably for crimes. Were most of them violent crimes? What, and how do you think their schizophrenia played into them being incarcerated?
Oh, well, the schizophrenia was the cause of it.
Right.
You know, see, when I was at the state hospital, the psychiatrist, when some of the patients told the psychiatrist that I was asking them questions about what the voices were telling them,
Yeah.
the psychiatrist went nuts. I ended up in their offices being ordered never to do that because the voices were hallucinations, and asking them questions about the voices reinforced their hallucinations and made them worse. That happened to me twice. So I had to be very careful about asking questions while I was in the state hospital because psychiatrists were being beat up by psychotic patients at a rate much higher than any other staff member in that hospital. So I think they were afraid of schizophrenics because they were getting popped. And I always wondered about that. What are these people who only spend 20 minutes a month with these people saying to them in the short period of time that they were with them that
Right.
are causing them to punch their lights out? You know, that took me years to figure out, probably 7. You know,
Yeah.
but you know, one of the things that's like a ground rule. Sherry Sweeney, my co-author in the book, she was hearing voices when she was a young girl.
Okay.
Okay, she's an engineer, so she has the mind of an engineer and computer scientist, and she went at it logically. She found out it's like a program, and the program is they will tell you um, consummate lies. I mean, they don't care how they upset you. They have to upset you to drain your energy. They have to get you negative. They have to get you angry and anxious and paranoid to drain your energy. Okay, so they say all those rotten things that you were just saying. Now, one ground rule that she came up with is that every negative thought about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side. Basic ground rule, you know, and that 99% of what the voices tell these people are lies. Right. So she came up with something called "That's a Lie" program. Now I noticed that these things were telling the patients lies. I was aware of that, and I'd ask them. I'd say, "Well, if you know they're lying to you, why do you believe them?" And they said something like, "Because they're so darn believable," something like that. But 99% of what they tell people are lies. They don't care what they tell people as long as it generates that negative emotional energy. That's what they feed off. Then they'll take that. The person is emotionally drained afterward. Okay. So, Sherry, if you go to my website and go to articles, you'll find a paper there on the That's a Lie program. That's something that all schizophrenics can put to use that will either weaken the voices and with long enough use will even get rid of them in some cases. So if you don't believe what these things are telling you, they can't grab hold of you.
Right.
So
Right.
they have to realize that these voices are not who they are. These voices are separate from them. They're coming from somewhere else. That is not the message that the psychiatric mafia is telling the planet. They're saying, you're the sick one. Your mind is sick. Your brain is broken. It's you. The truth of it is not you. These things are coming from somewhere else. They don't belong to you. They're trying to take over your mind. They're
Right.
trying to control humans, and they're trying to take over control of whoever they can get their hands on.
Yep.
You look at our prisons, they are full to overflowing right now. They're doing a good job. People need to wake up. We are spiritual beings.
Yep.
And we have spiritual afflictions. And these things are trying to control us. They're trying to control society. And they're doing a goddamn good job of it right now. Look what's happening around the planet. And one thing interesting, if you go to that list of patterns that is on my website, you'll see that virtually every single one of those patterns is what's coming off of the mainstream media news right now. There's a one-to-one correlation between what schizophrenics are hearing and what these deep state scumbags are broadcasting over the mainstream media.
Yeah, I remember I was hanging out with a schizophrenic, and he was watching the news, and he's like, we're watching like Fox News or something. He's like, I hear Satan talking over the airwaves. I'm like, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, like the
exactly
colors and the way they use it and the wording and the lighting, yeah, it's somebody in the comments here said it almost sounds like they work for the entities.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Do you think unknowingly,
they sure
or
do.
where are you at there? Do you think this is a grand evil conspiracy, or most people are unwitting?
I think that all the mainstream media is controlled by them.
Right.
Virtually all of it. Fox News would mix in some truth sometimes, but CNN and ABC are two of the worst. BBC is controlled. They're all controlled. You look at the patterns that these voices run. Go to my website, go to articles, look at those patterns. You'll see that there's a one-to-one correspondence between what the schizophrenics are hearing and what is coming over the mainstream media right now.
Yeah.
Thank heavens that the mainstream media are losing listeners in large numbers.
Yep.
But there's still a lot of people who are listening to that stuff as if it's the truth. They don't realize that it's propaganda.
Yeah, and more insidious now. I talk about this in previous episodes and solo episodes, is that we have the not so obvious establishment coming up now, where you have all of these other people who are seen as edgy and cool. Like even Joe Rogan, right? If you watch Joe Rogan's earliest streams, he was very out there, but I don't think you can get to any level of power or influence and not toe the line. It's like now that the mainstream media is collapsing, we have this alternative media, but most of them are just a little edgier, a little bit more truthful, but they still go along with all of the dominant narratives.
Well, you look at Twitter. I mean, that's free speech. The truth will appear there, but there's also propaganda that appears there. But you can make up your own mind. I mean, at least the information's there, and you can tell intuitively what's the truth and what are lies. Those of us who are awake can see. We can feel it. You can look at the news article and go, well, this is propaganda or this is lies. You feel it. But what they're trying to do is control all that media. If it wasn't for Elon Musk, we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have free speech because they control all the mainstream media. They control YouTube.
Yep, they control all of it. Yeah, we were talking offline that you're on strike 2. I'm only 2 months in on YouTube, and I'm on strike 1. And so I'm being very cautious. But yeah, this information needs to get out, and it's very important. So yeah, and it's a tough balance, right? Between, I never want to censor any of my guests. I never want to self-censor, but to stay on, sometimes you have to use a bit of coded language.
You might want to strike that last comment.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, wow. So Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here so far. Very curious. So other people I've spoken to, they talk about almost entity attachment, that they almost attach to the human. Um, I'd be curious, do you subscribe to that? Do you think that
Yeah.
it's simply a whisper? Is there, yeah, what do you think's really going on here, like
Well, I'll tell
mechanistically?
you what, if you want the experience of that, you can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com and look up the interview with Lynn Manette.
Right.
She's a a nurse who worked in she did an internship on a psych ward. She was able to see what these things look like, and she drew a picture of it on some of those interviews, and they would attach. And she flipped one off and knocked it off a person. She has a very interesting story. There's another what is her name? There's another one by a psychic researcher who recorded what these things sounded like, and she got a recording that you could actually hear. I mean, it wasn't something. Most of the time, I'll get contacted and the person say, "Hey, I got a recording of it," and I'll play it, and I can't hear it. It sounds like a bunch of static to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But this one was very, very clear.
Wow.
Um,
Do do you know where they attach on the body or the
they
spirit?
usually attach behind the neck.
Oh my god. I can't believe you said that because a guy I'm talking to offline, the former high priest of black magic, said the same thing. Yeah, I just didn't want to have a leading question. So wow, that's very fascinating. I actually want to read what he said to you. He said, the nervous system. He said, what parts of the body do they live in? That's what he wanted me to ask you. He said, I have found them in the spinal cord and back of the neck. The nervous system is the interface. Brain, spinal, it's electrical, just as you said. That's what he saw. And drugs create a balanced polarity in the brain using heavy metals, aluminum oxides, titanium oxides, and a few others. So, yeah, a lot of what you're saying there is exactly what he's saying as well, which is very fascinating. Wow. And so, yeah, I heard you say that she kind of brushed them off. Would they reattach later or?
Well, in that case, they didn't. But, it's all got to do with frequency.
Okay.
It's the higher your frequency, the less chance they have of attaching because they're very low frequency entities. They're the scum of the earth, So they will, if you keep your frequency high and move in a positive spiritual direction and keep feeding that direction, that's the ultimate solution.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And could you maybe just walk us through a few people that you've worked with? I see you have testimonials on jerrymarzinsky.com, but can you just give us a highlight of a couple, what they were dealing with, what they did, and where they are now with your approach?
Well, my approach is multifaceted. There's several parts to it, including the That's a Lie program, including MACE, including a number of things that I've found that they hate the 23rd Psalm. So it's a battle. I've heard that there are some exorcists that can pull them off and drive certain ones away. But if the person doesn't increase their frequency and get on a positive spiritual path and stay there, they will draw them back.
Yes.
If they're using drugs and they go back to using drugs, they will draw them back.
Yes, I've heard the exact same.
The 23rd Psalm is like punching them in the face. They can't stand it. The 91st Psalm, they can't stand it. The lie program, they have to get you to believe what they're saying because their only way to get action in the physical world is through physical beings. They can't control anything themselves without taking over a physical being. They can't, for the most part, they can't speak to anybody else. They won't speak to psychiatrists. They won't speak to family members. You know, the only way they can operate in the physical world is by taking somebody over and influencing
Yeah.
their behavior.
Yeah, the way they've been described to me is almost like fiends. Like like for example, leeches, they can stay dormant in the water for years, right? And so they're outside of time, so they're constantly like starved, fiendish organisms, right? That are seldom actually fed, right? So once they, like, the highlight of their existence is to actually connect, and through even partial connection, they can at least experience the physical world, right? It's kind of like a
Yeah, and
parasitic relationship, or
so well, it is, and it's like I've heard that they're assigned to destroy certain people. So Swedenborg says you have two demons attached to you and you have two angels attached to you. Now, what I've seen is that the demons can speak in whatever language you're at. The the angels speak more in feeling and intuition.
mm-hmm.
You know, they'll tell you, hey, that doesn't feel right. Don't you know? They don't speak in words unless you're on the verge of death. Then they'll do that. But the bad ones will speak. You know, they'll put those thoughts in your mind. Yeah, go look at that porn magazine, or yeah, go get another hit of the crack, or you can have a couple of drinks. That's okay, or you can look at that porn magazine, or you know, they're constantly chipping away at you, and they'll sit there and they'll wait until something really pisses you off, and then they'll just pour gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
You know, say, well, why don't you punch that guy in the face, or why don't you throw something at him, or to try to make the situation worse. But
Yeah.
they're around all the time. Everybody's got them.
Yeah,
It's
for
it's
me,
who
it's the times when it's justified anger. Like when somebody has actually slighted me and made a mistake that's, objectively, rationally the case, then there's I hear the
Yep.
whisper where
That
it's like, you were
right,
wronged. You're in the right here. Like, they're wrong.
right,
Like,
right,
and it cranks up
right,
to 11. Like, something that was just like, okay, let's talk about this. It's a bit of an issue. I feel like this, like, justified, anger,
right, right.
and then afterwards, I'm
Uh,
like, what the hell happened to me? Like, why did I get so angry about something that was, not that big of a deal? You know?
Well, that's why. And the other
Uh,
other thing is like, well, why did I say that? Or what did he mean by that? Or are those people laughing at me? Or they'll put those doubts in your mind to make you think that you're a bad person.
yeah,
You know, that you're a screw up. And if you believe that stuff, then you become that, or you
yeah,
become paranoid. They want you paranoid. They feed off of paranoia. They don't call paranoid schizophrenic, paranoid for nothing. Those people are terrified of everything. And these things feed off of that negative energy.
yeah. It's like wherever they can find the in, right? And it's very unique for each person. Yeah, like for me, especially as I've gone more along my spiritual path, like I don't really get angry or upset with most things, right? I've been a lot more just even keel, and yeah, thank God for that. But there's still always like those little chinks in the armor, Like for me, it's like justified anger, and yeah,
And psychiatry and psychology aren't helping anything either. They got this DSM, this Directory of Mental Illnesses, Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses. You open it up, and it's like their Bible. I mean, they worship this thing. They've got virtually every mental illness known to man, and they have it laid out. So here's these numbers and these letters and these descriptions, and laid out very methodically. It looks like they really know what they're talking about. All these mental illnesses are made up. There's not one objective test to measure for any of them. A group of psychiatrists get together every few years and they make these things up. You know, they they vote them in, they vote them out. So they meet, and the psychiatrists get together. 2/3 of them are involved with the drug companies, and they make up these mental illnesses that the drug companies can make these drugs for to treat them and charge outrageous prices. And look at some of the crap they put in there. Mathematics disorder is one of their disorders. Caffeine intoxication disorder. People who drink too much coffee, it's a disorder. Sibling relational disorder. These are people, kids that fight with each other. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, DSM-5 labels almost all human emotion as mental illness. A child who talks back, a man who spends too much time on the internet, a woman who grieves the death of her husband or child for more than 2 weeks are all labeled as mentally ill and told they need to be drugged. Unhappiness is labeled as depression. People are encouraged to numb themselves with drugs instead of dealing with life situations that are causing the unhappiness. Again, 2/3 of the psychiatrists on these boards making up these factitious mental illnesses belong to big pharma. You know? And these things get crazier from there. They got sexual orientation disorder, homosexuality. They got Florence syndrome. This is being overwhelmed by beauty, such as in Florence, Italy. The symptoms are fainting and dizziness. The treatment is antidepressant medications. This is lunacy. Paris syndrome happens mostly to Japanese patients visiting France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, feelings of persecution, which before would have been labeled, cultural shock. This is bullcrap what they're doing to the entire planet.
I know it's
this
even crazier
drugging,
here in Canada. That they said, people who were even skeptical of a certain, let's just call it procedure, or experimental therapy, are by nature disordered and should have mental health and seek treatment. Yeah, being skeptical.
Oh, and I'm sure the
pharma.
psychiatrist in Canada would be more than glad to treat them for a certain price.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. Yeah, it's just turning every human experience and emotion into a pathology with a solution. But as Mr. McCool said here in the comments, sounds like a pretty profitable business plan, Jerry.
Oh, it is profitable. I've got the profit numbers here somewhere, but it was like $14 billion a year that they're making on the sale of antidepressant. So each one, antidepressant drugs, which MACE can treat much cheaper and much more effectively. They're making $14 billion on antidepressant drugs. They're also making $14 billion on antipsychotic drugs. Okay. So they're making a fortune on those. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, 60 miles south of here. I mean, for a person in the U.S. to stay sane on psychiatric drugs, you have to get a prescription. Okay, you can't get a prescription without going through the psychiatric mafia.
Yeah.
So you have to pay for an office visit, which is, $150, $200, whatever they charge. Then you have to get the drug, which is some, $800 a month for antipsychotic drugs. Yeah. Then you got to go to the pharmacy to get it. So you're paying the pharmacy, you're paying the psychiatrist. So you're talking maybe $800 to $1,000 to stay sane on these drugs in the U.S. And you need to get a prescription. These are not abusable drugs. Nobody in their right mind would take these drugs. They're not recreational drugs. They have horrible side effects. Nobody wants to take these drugs. Not even the people who are crazy want to take these drugs. They go off them at some point. They can't stand them anymore. If you go across the border going to Mexico, you can pick these drugs up over the counter without a prescription. You can see a psychiatrist for a fraction of the price you can see one here.
Yep.
He'll tell you, okay, you got this disorder, you need this drug, you go into the pharmacy, you get it over the counter. And the cost is about $75 for the same thing that cost you $800 here in the US and Canada. Yep. It's a racket. It's a friggin' racket. And they're ripping off the people of this world to an extent that is beyond belief.
It's incredible. Yeah.
In 1952, the DSM listed 106 psychiatric disorders. In 1980, it listed 256 psychiatric disorders. They're making these things up as they go along. in the DSM-5 lists 297 psychiatric disorders, and they're fabricating more every year. They're just making them up. There is no test for any of them. There is no blood test. There's no EEG. There's no EKG. There's no lab work. There's nothing to measure any of these things. They're just opinions of these people that are doing this humongous scam on humanity.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It's sick.
Yeah.
It's just sick.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Well, so I always like to be solution oriented on this channel. And so I think we've given a pretty good overview of what the problem is, right? So we're dealing fundamentally with entities, spirits, whatever we want to call them, that are external to us in some regard, that are implanting our thoughts with negative thoughts that are theirs, getting us to identify with them. Slowly we are internalizing that and driven to insanity. So what would you say to people in terms of how to protect themselves? And like where does it begin? Because you don't restrict this only to schizophrenics and the severely mentally ill. You very clearly state that we're all dealing with this to one extent or another. So, how do we, I guess, tighten up our armor a little, Jerry?
You get on a positive spiritual path and stay there. Christianity, Muslims, I mean, they have the same God we do. I don't know what all the fighting is about. Now, the other thing you need to mention is what they did with Mace with you is they went in there and they got rid of a trauma. So what happens during a trauma is you make a decision about who you are during that trauma, and it's not a good decision. It's always a bad decision. It's not a rational decision. You don't make rational decisions during a trauma. So it's like a program that you have created, a negative program that you've created that's running in the background all the time. Like, oh, this happened to me, I'm no good. Or this happened to me, I'm a bad person. Or this happened to me, I'm worthless. Okay? Mace goes in there and gets rid of that programming. So it's not just the spirit stuff. I would highly recommend Mace for depression, anxiety, bipolar stuff, common psychological problems. Okay. Now, schizophrenia, I've had some success getting rid of the negative traumas that these people have. There have been a dozen or so have completely recovered, so it is possible. Psychiatry says, oh, it's not possible. Once you have schizophrenia, there's no recovering. That's a lie. I've had at least a dozen people completely recover, completely.
Wow.
Yep. All right.
What about diet? I've heard several people say getting on a low carb and carnivore diet has helped them as well. Have you done much research into the interplay with diet and mental illness or schizophrenia specifically?
Well, I know that the entities don't want you eating good food. They want you eating junk. They want you to feel bad. They don't want you to sleep. So that's one of the things they do is they keep you awake. If they keep you awake long enough, you don't have the energy to fight back against them. And if you don't know what they are, you don't know what there is to fight against. You think it's you. And that's what psychiatry wants you to keep thinking. That's what psychology wants you to keep thinking. Oh, you have a mental disorder. This is paranoid schizophrenia. You're disordered. You're broken. As long as you're thinking that way, you're going to stay that way.
Right. But say if somebody's really struggling with sleep, what can they do? Because I know a lot of schizophrenia.
They exercise until they wear themselves out. Mm-hmm. But the voices don't want them exercising. They don't want them eating good food. They don't want them sleeping. Right. Now these psychiatric drugs all have horrible. They destroy your nervous system. They actually destroy your nervous system. So, psychiatry is doing damage.
Right.
They're rotting out your brain and your nervous system. Those shock treatments A neurologist can see the damage done after just one of those shock treatments.
Hmm.
And they're giving these shock treatments to thousands of patients.
Right.
So if you're not sleeping, exercise, wear yourself out, go get over-the-counter sleeping meds or something like that. Um, Now, what the majority of these antipsychotic drugs are major tranquilizers.
Yep.
They calm the person down. And the voices don't like that because they want the person hyped up. They want them angry. They want them paranoid. They want them uh, uh, anxious and fearful. They want that. And these drugs interfere with that. So that's one of the reasons psychiatrists are getting popped by schizophrenics at a much higher rate than any other doctor. It's the voices that are attacking the psychiatrist because of the drugs.
And did you experience that as well when you started figuring out, what the game is and that they're real? Like, were you ever attacked? Did you ever feel in danger doing this work, or?
Uh, I did. I was never attacked. I think I was always protected. I remember one schizophrenic coming into my office one day, and we were talking about something else, and then all of a sudden she just stopped and she said, "You're never going to be hurt doing this." And I'm like, "Where'd that come from?" She goes, "There's a huge angel standing behind you, massive." She said, "He's watching over you." I said, "Well, that's good to know." And I never was hurt. I was threatened. Uh, I could see, I've had schizophrenics run out of the office.
Mm-hmm.
There was one where the voices were telling in the prison, they were telling him to go get a shank and stick it in my gut. They were telling them to attack me, but they never did.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had experiences when I was younger. I always felt much more tuned into this stuff, even at a young age. And I remember once I was at a party where everyone was drunk and on drugs, and I had the most bizarre experiences, and I had to leave. It People who were even my friends like turned on me out of the blue. One guy was near blackout drunk, and he just started fighting me, like a friend of mine, and he
Yeah.
had no idea what he was doing.
No, that wasn't him.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was the spirit, the alcohol spirit. They don't call alcohol spirits for nothing.
yeah. Yeah, it was spooky. I was like
But
15.
yeah, you can actually see the alcoholic being taken over. The people who live with alcoholics, they can see that the person totally changes. Their eyes change. They're not the same person anymore when they get violent. They're taken over. They have these blackouts and they come out of it. They don't even remember what they did. I had one guy who went into a blackout and he woke up in another city hundreds of miles away the next day. He didn't even know where he was. He didn't know how he got there.
Wow.
Something else was driving that car.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever dove into the realm of like aliens, extraterrestrial at all in your own research?
Well, I think some of these things are extraterrestrial.
Hmm.
You can talk to them and you can ask them. I mean, I've talked to them. I've had conversations with them. They don't like that. They're not supposed to do that. But some of them, every once in a while, some will say, "Yeah, no, we never lived a human life."
Hmm.
You know, uh, some of them do come from other planets. It's not often,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, some of them are alien entities.
Yeah, because there's so many interesting parallels. Around electrical lines, I'm told, is when a lot of UFO and sightings and entities appear, like in power stations. There's something about electricity that they are drawn to, and then you hear a lot of these channelers who channel aliens, aliens and
Got to be very
extraterrestrials.
careful with that. You got to be very careful with that.
Oh yeah,
I've and Ouija boards. People think Ouija boards are toys. No, they're very dangerous. I've encountered several schizophrenics who'd been taken over by the voices that were running Ouija boards.
yeah.
Do not play with Ouija boards. They're very dangerous.
Yeah, I had that experience as a kid. My family on a vacations, they brought it out, and spooky enough because like some there's a large gathering of families, and they're like, "Oh, we'll get a Ouija board. We used to play that when we were kids." And we go into town, and there was this store that was closed, and we knocked on the door, and the person just happened to be in there cleaning, and they had a Ouija board. It's right, so everyone's like, "Oh, it's fate," and we ended up playing this, and I got terrified for a month as a child. Like I felt that somebody was watching me, and it was totally terrifying, and I just knew I never touched that stuff anymore.
See,
But
that's
yeah,
one of the ways of letting them in.
yeah,
You're asking them to come in.
yeah,
Channeling is the same thing. You got to be very careful, because they will come in. You are allowing them in, and they have the right to be there if you allow them in.
yep,
You never know who you're entering when you're channeling, or you never know what that thing is that's coming in, and they're consummate liars. They will tell you they are Jesus Christ, or they're your guardian angel, or they're some being that can help you out, or they know things that you don't. They'll tell you all those things. Once you allow them in, you've given them permission to
yeah.
inhabit you.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the channeling. Just to be clear for everybody, I don't advocate that at all. I take the same stance as Jerry. But you see a lot of these people saying that, like the aliens are saying that they're us from the future and they're worried about us and they're going to take us into a golden age and, stop all of the madness in the world and, just channel them and pray to them or, meditate to
No,
them. And it's,
you got to be very, very careful.
yeah,
Because these things they can make themselves look like anything. They can make themselves look like angels.
yeah,
You know, there was one guy who had he was in the operating room, and he was struggling to breathe. He eventually had a near-death experience, and he said he heard the sweetest voice he's ever heard in his life, telling him, he said he was struggling for every breath. Every breath was painful.
wow,
And this voice came and it was telling him, just stop breathing. Everything will be okay. We'll take care of everything for you. You know. And then he found out that that was one of these dark entities. Then if he stopped breathing, he would die.
right, right,
So they
yeah.
can take any form that they want to take for the most part. You got to be very, very careful.
But I'm curious, do they ever because I know you say they're always negative, but then also like bipolar people at first they have a vibe of almost like one with everybody. They're almost like hippies. Like I love everybody. I feel connected to everybody. And then they go to the, I am God, craziness. And so, you know, in schizophrenia and bipolar, do you think they also will manipulate people with false positivity, like pretend that
Oh
they
yeah,
are Jesus
right.
or
Sure,
God or
sure. That's
you
that's
know?
that's common. And
Okay,
they'll tell the person, yeah, I'm Jesus, or I'm God, or I'm an angel. You know, you got to be very careful. Ain't like I said, angels usually don't speak in words. They speak in feeling or intuition.
right,
You know, it's they, when you're messing with this kind of stuff, you got to be very careful because they can, since they can they can read your lower astral mind. So bad stuff that happens to you, they know it. They can go in there and they can go, you remember when you did this, you remember when you did that. They can pull up every rotten thing that you ever did and rub it in your face.
right,
And it sounds like
yeah,
blaming yourself.
right. And do you think some of it is just us though? Like in terms of negative thought process, like do you think we're incapable of negative thoughts on our own,
No,
or
no.
or how do you delineate? I guess.
Well,
Like,
what Swedenborg says is that you are the decider. Okay. and
okay,
and like the Native Americans say, yeah, you have two wolves on your shoulder.
right,
One is bad and one is good. the one that you feed is the one that's going to grow. So you were given free will to make a decision. Okay.
Right.
So you make a decision as to which thoughts you're going to listen to.
Wow. Yep. I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah, you're saying it almost doesn't matter where the origin is. It's ultimately up to us. Like
It's
if we,
ultimately up to you.
yeah, yeah, that's
If you
fascinating.
start feeding the negative side, if you start paying attention to the negative side, if you start acting out on the negative side, you start doing things that are against the Ten Commandments. That's what's preached in the Bible. You're the one who's deciding.
Right. Yep.
So what do you want to fill your mind with? You want to fill your mind with good, positive, spiritual stuff, or you want to fill your mind with crap? Murder movies and war stories and evil stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
you're the ones that decide.
Yeah.
We we're born not knowing anything, not being able to survive on our own. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're the ones that decide what we're going to put into our minds,
Yep.
what we're going to attend to.
No, it's fantastic advice, and it gives people, that is the path to freedom for people who are struggling with this, but with it comes a lot of responsibility because it is up to us every day, every choice that we make, how we choose to live our lives, what we put in to our bodies and our minds, who we have around us. People want a quick fix, right? And I think that's the
Right,
allure of the modern health industry is people don't want to do the work. They want to take a
right,
pill, right? They
right, exactly. And that's what psychiatry's pushing. Oh, we got a pill for everything. Come and see us. And the psychiatrist's office are full. I mean, you try to get an appointment with a psychiatrist, they're backed up for months.
yeah, yeah,
And those
it's
drugs don't cure anything. They cure nothing. They just merely dope you up. They don't cure any of your problems like Mace does. You
yeah,
know, they don't cure anything.
yeah.
So those of you who are interested in getting some real treatment, go to www.maceenergymethod.com/about/ and that will tell you about Mace, and you will have a list of practitioners there
Mm-hmm.
that you can talk to who will cure what bothers you. But
Cure
you're
what
going to have
ails
to
you.
do some work at it.
100%. Yeah. Well, Jerry, with the time we have left, I'd be curious, just to understand a little bit of where you see, let's say collectively, where we're at within this framework, right? So, you've outlined that you believe a lot of not only news but world events, I'm assuming, are, by these entities, guiding humans. Um, and also, we do see a lot more people starting to understand this concept, right? People describe it as a great awakening. I am a bit torn of how true that is, but we see a lot more people waking up to these realities. So I'd be curious just to understand how you see where we're at as a culture, and where do you see things going in the next, 5-10 years? Are you ultimately optimistic that this is something that will become more mainstream and people will come out ahead on this, or do you see things getting progressively worse? Or yeah.
Well, I see truth coming out in like never before.
Yep.
I mean, never has this much truth come out. And God is truth, and God is love, So that is flowing in at a horrendous rate right now.
Yeah.
And the demonic side is panicking. They're doing everything they can to destroy us now while they can, while they have the control.
Yeah.
Because they can't function if people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They work in the darkness. They work with people being ignorant. If people would wake up to what's going on and realize that they're driving this bad stuff that's happening, and that people shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff. That they can't function. They have to convince people that the only control they have is kind of taking people over and getting them to do their dirty work for them.
Right.
And you look at governments all over the planet right now, they've got these scumbags. You got Trudeau, and this Biden character who's not even the real Biden. He doesn't even look like the real Biden. You put the two next to each other, you can see clearly they're different people. So here's this actor, run by the deep state, who's controlling the United States right now, that is destroying this country. Letting drugs and fentanyl and meth are flowing over the border like never before. Criminals are coming over the border. That Brazil has emptied their prisons into the United States, and these people are crossing the border and going into Canada.
Yeah, it's a mess.
So it's a battle. Yeah. It's a battle going on right now. And then on top of that, you got all this geographical. You got the poles shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Which could bring a major catastrophe to the planet. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. It's a very interesting time to be alive.
That's for sure. Yeah, and I don't know if it's just brainwashing from a young age, but I do think good will win in the end. I am optimistic. I think we're all here for a reason. I think you're doing what you need to do for a reason. I think we're all here, and that's what we're called. We're called to, in every moment, try to make the best decision we can. To honor God and to take a higher path. And it's so easy. That's the thing, right? It's like it's a slide versus steps. It's a rapid slide downwards, and it's a step-by-step process moving upwards.
Well, you got to understand we're all spiritual beings. And what is that? I mean, your life comes from God. I mean, you're that part of you is an image of God. And it's there. You're connected. It's you who turn away from God. God doesn't turn away from you. The further you turn away from God, the more you're inviting these things in.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so powerful in your message is that don't listen to those voices. God loves you. He wants you to be free and healthy and happy. Right? That is where we're supposed to be. That's our natural state, if you will, right?
See, and these things don't have any love. That's one thing that marks them. They have no love for anybody or anything. There is no love in their universe. Mm-hmm. It's completely dark. Can you imagine a place with no love? That's where they come from. There's no love in their universe where these things originate. None.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, Jerry, it's I think I'm going to wrap things up. It's been, I think, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to listen to this for 2.5 hours.
We had quite a few tuning in, actually. It's been great. Yeah, I want to thank everybody who stayed on for the whole stream there. Yeah, Jerry, we'd love to have you on again sometime. We plugged jerrymarzinsky.com. Anything else you want to leave people with and let people know where they can find you and what they should be looking for?
Well, jerrymarzinsky.com. And then again, this book will give you how we came to the conclusion that the voices are entities, that they are not hallucinations. And, what psychiatry and psychology are doing, and the educational system, brainwashing people into believing that these entities are hallucinations, is a travesty of justice. It's evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deception of the highest degree. These things are alive. Satan is alive on this planet, and he's ruling a lot of things right now. People are waking up. They're waking up to the truth. They're waking up to how evil these people are in high places, and they're working to take them down. But you have to do something. You can't just sit there and watch it. Somehow you have to take part. You
Right.
know, donate money to people who are doing things to bring about the right, that are doing something to try to fix things, or protest, or write your congressman or your parliament, or do something. Don't just sit there. You know, if everybody just sits there, these things are going to take over.
Yeah.
Do something.
Do something. Amen, brother. Well, Jerry Marzinsky, thanks so much for joining us today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end the stream with Psalm 23 in the voice of Snoop Dogg. And then, Jerry, I'll say my goodbyes offline. So thank you so much for joining, Jerry. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on the stream. And our goodbye will be Snoop Dogg.
King James Version KJV. Font size. Passage. Resources. Hebrew/Greek. Your content. Psalm 23 King James Version. 23 The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. 2 He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. 3 He restoreth my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. 4 Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. 5 Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. 6 Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. King James Version KJV.
Okay, guys, thanks again. Closing down the stream. Good night.